The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound that filled the bridge of the Athena, a sleek Federation vessel darting through the void of space at a speed that made even veteran spacefarers like Captain Lila Trent uneasy. The stars streaked past the windows in a dazzling blur, as if the universe itself was rushing by in fear of something much darker. The XX Racks were notorious for being one of the most dangerous species known to galactic civilization. Vicious, insectoid creatures with a history of annihilating any race they deemed inferior. And now, humanity was on their doorstep. Lila stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the stars, her fingers lightly resting on the control console. Beneath the calm exterior, her mind raced, calculating, strategizing. She had faced hostile forces before, pirates, rogue AIs, even entire fleets of alien ships. But the XX Racks were something different. They didn't just want to conquer, they wanted to erase. "Captain, we received a transmission from Federation Command," said a voice behind her. Lila turned to see Lieutenant Sarah Navarra, the ship's communications officer, standing at the entrance to the bridge. She had an almost ethereal calm about her, her dark hair cascading over her uniform like a silken veil. But Lila could see the tension in her eyes. They all felt it. "Put it through," Lila said, turning back to the viewport. The screen flickered, and soon the face of Admiral Zavik, a grizzled alien commander from the Galactic Peace Federation, appeared. His reptilian features twisted into a grimace. "Captain Trent," he began, his voice low and gravelly, "I trust you and your crew are aware of the stakes. The XX Rats have agreed to meet you on their homeworld, but their terms are clear. Either you negotiate an alliance, or they'll consider your ship a threat to be neutralized." Lila's brow furrowed. The Federation had hoped to broker peace with the XX Racks for years, but it seemed the moment of truth had arrived, and the clock was ticking. "I understand, Admiral," Lila replied. "We'll handle it." The transmission ended, and she turned back to her crew. They were all here for one purpose: survival. She could only hope their collective talents would be enough. Dr. Jasper Klein, standing by a console filled with scientific data, adjusted his glasses and glanced up at the captain. "If we're going to make it out of this alive, we need to focus on what we know about the XX Racks. They're highly intelligent, but their survival instincts are, well, predatory. They'll use any advantage to destroy us." Jasper was a genius, both an engineer and a xenobiologist, with a penchant for solving problems under pressure. He had a mind that could twist science into weapons, tools, and even solutions to problems the crew hadn't even anticipated. Despite his knack for invention, his normally calm demeanor was now laced with concern. "We don't know what we're walking into." "I'm aware," Lila replied, her voice steady. "But this isn't about their weapons or technology. It's about strategy and survival." Cassidy Marlowe, the youngest member of the crew and the mission's diplomat, stood by the side, her fingers drumming nervously on the armrest of her chair. She was a dreamer at heart, an idealist who believed in communication over combat. With her bright, eager eyes and infectious smile, she had always been one to believe that there was always room for hope, even when everything seemed lost. "Isn't there a chance we could talk to them?" she asked, her voice full of youthful optimism. "I mean, yes, they're dangerous, but what if they just misunderstand us? What if we can convince them that we're not a threat?" Lila gave her a soft smile, though her eyes betrayed the reality of the situation. "That's a nice thought, Cass. But we both know that the XX Racks don't think like we do. They see everything as either a resource or a threat. There's no room for middle ground." Cass's shoulders sagged a bit, but she refused to give up. "Maybe that's where we can stand out. We're not like any species they've encountered. We think differently. If we show them we're not like the others..." Lila's smile faded, replaced by the serious look of a leader who had seen too many idealistic dreams dashed by cold, harsh reality. "Maybe, but we need a plan that involves more than hope. Hope won't keep us alive." And then there was Marcus Hayes, or Wildcard, as the crew had affectionately dubbed him. He sat in the corner of the bridge, leaning back in his chair, fiddling with a small device. His dark, stubbled face broke into a grin that was half confidence, half mischief. Marcus had a way of turning the most dire situation into something he could laugh at, even when it felt like the universe was about to collapse on top of them. "Hope's great and all, But I think we need something a little more actionable, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. What do we know about the XX racks? They're big, they're strong, and they're angry. So let's hit them where it hurts. Lila shot him a warning glance. I'm not sending you in for a one-man assault against their entire fleet, Marcus. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Wouldn't be the first time. His grin widened, showing no fear. But I get it. We need to be smart about this. Think our way through. Jasper, always quick to adapt, glanced up from his station, eyes already calculating. If we can get close enough, I could hack into their communication systems, disable their weapons, maybe even their shields. You think you can crack that code? Lila asked. I've cracked tougher, Jasper replied, his confidence returning as he calculated the possibilities. The ship shuddered, breaking the moment of tension. The stars ahead began to dim as the Athena entered a dense asteroid field. The view ahead was nothing but floating rocks and jagged debris, a natural maze that could either shield them or be the very thing that brought their end. The XX racks had been waiting for this. We're almost there, Lila said, her tone hardening. All hands. Prepare for potential contact. Everyone stay sharp. Cass stepped forward, her optimism replaced by a hard resolve. Maybe we'll surprise them, she murmured. Maybe we'll show them something they've never seen before. Lila nodded but kept her eyes on the vast emptiness ahead. The reality was settling in fast. The XX racks weren't here to negotiate. This would be a test of human adaptability, of their ability to outthink a species that considered themselves the apex predator of the galaxy. As the crew braced for what was to come, one thing was clear. Whatever happened next, humanity's greatest weapon would be their ability to adapt and outmaneuver the enemies that sought to destroy them. The Athena dropped out of hyperspace just as the asteroid field enveloped them. The mission had truly begun, and the crew had no choice but to face what lay ahead. The Athena lurched as it entered the dense asteroid field. Rocks the size of buildings whizzed past, some scraping the ship's hull with deafening shrieks. On the bridge, the crew was quiet, eyes fixed on the view ahead. The XX Rack's homeworld was not far. Their territory lay deep within this deadly field, a natural defense against any who dared approach. Brace yourselves, Captain Lila Trent's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. The asteroid field was a calculated risk. It would mask their approach from the XX Racks, but also jeopardize the integrity of their ship if anything went wrong. Steady, she added, her hands firmly gripping the armrest of her chair. She could feel the vibrations beneath her, the constant groan of metal strained under pressure. Her mind raced. There was little room for error. If they miscalculated, they would be trapped, caught between the unforgiving rock and an alien species bent on destruction. Lieutenant Sarah Navarra, the communications officer, stood by the communications console, her fingers dancing over the controls with practiced ease. The woman was a master of her craft, her sharp intellect keeping the crew's communication channels open. But as she glanced up, her face was tight with concern. "Captain, we got a signal from the XX Racks," she said, voice strained. Lila turned. "What are they saying?" "Their ships are on the move," Sarah reported. "They know we're here." A chill ran down Lila's spine. The XX Racks were quick to react, and their ships were fast, but their true strength wasn't in speed. It was in their ability to overpower any enemy that dared challenge them. "How much time do we have?" "Not much. We'll be in their range in minutes." "Jasper," Lila called, turning to the ship's engineer, Dr. Jasper Klein, who was hunched over a console in the corner, his eyes glued to the display. "What's our status on the weapons and shields?" Jasper looked up, his face a mask of concentration. "Shields are operating at 70% capacity, but I can't promise they'll hold if we take a direct hit. The weapons are rudimentary at best." Lila exhaled sharply. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. "Cass," she added, turning to the young diplomat, "you're on the comms. Keep trying to reach them. Maybe there's a chance we can talk our way through this." Cassidy Marlowe, the youngest member of the crew, was standing by the door, her usually bright face now clouded with anxiety. Her youthful idealism still clung to her like a second skin, but even she knew the odds weren't in their favor. Her fingers danced nervously over a small translator device. "I'm trying," she murmured, "but their communication codes are scrambled. It's like they don't want us to reach them." Lila nodded grimly. "Just do your best. We need a distraction." Outside the ship, the asteroid field swirled in a violent dance, pieces of debris crashing into one another in a chaotic symphony. The Athena drifted like a ghost, trying to navigate the dangerous maze. Just as Lila began to think they might make it through unscathed, a series of flickering red lights washed over the bridge. The hull vibrated once again, and Sarah's voice cut through the tension. XX-Rax ships inbound. They've locked on. The ship shuddered violently, as if something massive had just slammed into the hull. Red lights flashed across the bridge. "We've got incoming." Jasper shouted, his fingers flying over the console, his eyes wide with panic. "They're using some kind of disruptor. It's frying the circuits." "We've got no choice," Lila said, slamming her fist on the armrest. "We need to engage them, now. Brace for impact." Marcus, wildcard Hayes, the team's unpredictable combat expert, was already moving before the captain could finish speaking. With a dark smirk, he pulled a weapons pack from the storage cabinet, checking the contents with a speed and ease that came from years of experience in tight spots. His fingers itched for action. "You're thinking what I'm thinking, right?" he asked, not waiting for a reply as he moved toward the airlock. Lila met his eyes, the weight of command in her gaze. "Do it, but stay in touch. I don't want you off the ship without a way to get back." Marcus winked and bolted out of the room, his every step filled with a type of reckless confidence that made him a necessary, if slightly terrifying, wildcard on this mission. On the surface of the planet below, the XX-Rax were already mobilizing. Their world was a sprawling, hostile landscape, a jungle filled with acid rivers, towering fungal structures, and deep ravines. Their cities were sprawling nests carved into the rock, a maze of underground tunnels and brutalist fortresses designed to defend against any threat. As Marcus suited up in his combat gear, he could already see the first signs of the XX-Rax advance. Their ships, resembling vast insectoid war machines, swarmed like a nest of angry hornets, darting in and out of the asteroid field with terrifying speed. "They'll be on us any minute now," he muttered under his breath as he loaded up a few extra grenades. He didn't need to be told twice. The fight was about to get ugly, but that was his element. Back on the bridge, the crew prepared for the worst. The Athena had just made it past the worst of the asteroid field when another jolt shook the ship. Lila's knuckles turned white on the armrest. The Athena was good, but against the XX-Rax, it was a fragile thing. "They're launching fighters," Sarah reported, her voice clipped. "They're coming in hot." Cassidy looked at the captain, her face pale but determined. "There's still a chance. If I can send a signal, I might be able to convince them to hold off." Lila looked at her and saw the spark of determination in her eyes, the same spark that had kept the crew going this far. "Do it, Cass. We need every edge we can get." Cass's hands flew over the comms panel, sending a signal into the XX-Rax fleet. Her voice trembled as she spoke in their guttural language, each word a hope and a prayer. "We come not to conquer, but to survive. We ask only for peace. Do not waste blood on us." The seconds dragged on like hours. The crew waited in tense silence as the first wave of XX-Rax ships approached, their deadly, insect-like forms looming large in the viewport. Then, a crackling noise filled the comms, followed by a harsh buzz. Cassidy's face fell. The XX-Rax were responding, but their words were anything but peaceful. "They say we're nothing but prey," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Nothing more than another species to consume." Lila's jaw tightened. "Then we fight." Outside the ship, Marcus was already making his move. The chaos of the space battle raged around him as he made his way to the surface of the planet. His mind focused on one thing: survival. The XX-Rax might think of themselves as the apex predators of the universe, but Marcus had a different perspective. He knew one thing for sure: they had underestimated humanity. And soon, they would learn that humans didn't just survive, they adapted. And adaptability was the deadliest weapon of all. As he crouched behind a rock, watching the XX-Rax formations approach, he grinned. The hunt was on. The battle for survival had begun. The crew of the Athena was outnumbered, outgunned, and stranded on a hostile alien planet. But there was something the XX-Rax didn't know. Humanity was the apex predator of the universe, and it was time to prove it. The Zoran mothership loomed ahead, an immense shadow that seemed to swallow the stars around it. The galactic endeavor had successfully navigated the asteroid field, but now, every breath felt like it could be their last. The real fight had just begun. Lena stood at the command console, her eyes locked on the giant warship, which sat ominously in space like a predator waiting for its prey. The ship's outer defenses were formidable, a nearly impenetrable shell of armor and energy shields. There was no way to take it down head-on. They needed to strike fast and deep, right at the heart of the beast. Ravi, take us into position. Dax, how long before we're in range to deploy the charges? Dax tapped his fingers against his chair, his eyes never leaving the view of the mothership. A couple of minutes. Tops, but I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about how long we can last once those Zoran bastards realize we're here. Lena's gaze flickered to him, sharp and calculating. That's exactly why we need to hit fast. Don't let them get a chance to react. Once the charges are planted, we get out. No questions, no hesitations. Dax shot her a grin. No promises, Captain, but I'll give it my best shot. As Ravi piloted the Endeavor toward the mothership's outer hull, Lena watched the rest of her crew prepare for the chaos ahead. Simon was at the engineering station, his eyes flicking rapidly across multiple screens, his mind always several steps ahead. There was a restless energy about him, a constant of thought that never stopped, always trying to predict and counteract every failure that might come their way. "This is it, Simon," Lena said, trying to mask attention in her voice. "You'll need to make sure those charges go off the moment we get in range." Simon met her gaze for a brief second before returning to his terminal. "Understood, Captain. I reinforced the systems to withstand any unexpected jolts. But if we're talking about a direct hit, I'll need time to reroute power. Let's just hope that won't be necessary." Lena nodded, her fingers gripping the edge of the console. "We'll do what we can to make sure that doesn't happen. Just stay sharp." The ship's proximity alarms blared, a high-pitched tone signaling their entry into the danger zone. Lena's heart skipped a beat, but she forced her body to remain calm. This was the moment that would define everything. They would either cripple the Zoran war effort or be swallowed up by their might. "Now or never, Captain," Ravi muttered as his fingers danced over controls, adjusting course. Lena's jaw tightened. "Engage stealth systems. Keep us off their radar as long as possible." The ship's external sensors flickered to life, cloaking their presence in the vast emptiness of space. The Endeavor blended into the shadows of the mothership's dark underside, as though it were just another piece of debris floating in the void. But it wouldn't stay hidden forever. The countdown was ticking down, and time was a luxury they couldn't afford. Dax stood and began making his way to the back of the bridge. "I'm heading to the hangar. The rest of you get ready for the fireworks." Lena nodded, watching him leave. Dax's willingness to charge headlong into danger was a double-edged sword. But right now, she didn't have time to question his methods. "Get us closer, Ravi," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos that threatened to break loose. Ravi's fingers flew over controls, maneuvering the ship with precision. The Zoran mothership loomed closer, its dark, jagged hull lined with towers that hummed with energy. The ship was a mechanical titan, but Lena could feel the pulse of humanity in her crew. This was their fight, their moment to show they could defy the odds. Suddenly, a series of warning lights flickered on, signaling the activation of the Zoran ship's defenses. The shields flared, a barrier of red energy beginning to form around the massive vessel. "Shit!" Dax's voice crackled over the comm. "They're locking onto us. That cloaking won't hold for long. We got maybe 10 seconds before they see us." Lena's breath caught. "Deploy the charges, Simon. Now!" Simon's voice was calm but urgent. "On it, Captain." The ship lurched as the charges were ejected, sliding into position on the mothership's outer hull. They would be just a few meters from the central power core, precise but risky. One wrong move, and the entire ship could explode. Lena's eyes never left the viewport. The Zorans had seen them. Red lights flashed across the dashboard, signaling that the ship's weapons were powering up. But the charges were set. "Charges are in place," Simon confirmed, his voice strained with concentration. "I've rigged them to go off on a timer. But, Captain, we're about to be in their line of fire. We need to move now." Lena nodded. "Ravi, take us out of here full speed." Ravi's hands flew over the controls, pulling the Endeavour away from the mothership as the first barrage of Zoran plasma cannons exploded in their wake. The ship jerked violently as the weapon's fire narrowly missed, but they were too close now. The Zorans were onto them. "We've got incoming," Ravi shouted. "We're not going to outrun them for long." The ship rocked again as the Zorans unleashed another volley of fire. The Endeavour's shields flared under the assault, the protective barrier flickering and sparking under the strain. Lena held her breath, watching the countdown on the screen. 5 seconds, Simon called out. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. Every nerve screamed with urgency. This was it. They had no more time. "Now!" she ordered. The explosion shook the Endeavour, sending a shock wave through the ship. The Zoran mothership's shield shattered, and then, with a deafening roar, the charges detonated. The force of the blast tore through the massive ship's hull, sending debris scattering into space. For a moment, there was only silence, broken only by the distant echo of the destruction they had caused. The mothership's engine sputtered as it began to drift, its massive structure crumbling under the damage. But the Zorans were far from defeated. The first wave of reinforcements was already on its way. "We got their attention," Dax said, his voice grim. "Time to make our exit." "Not yet," Lena replied, her gaze fixed on the burning wreckage of the mothership. "We're not finished until we're out of here." Ravi's hands trembled on the controls. "We're going to need a miracle to get through this." Lena looked at him, her voice steady. "We've already made one." The battle was far from over, but they had taken the first step toward victory. The Athena groaned under the strain, the hum of the engine sounding like a wounded animal struggling to flee its predators. The asteroid field was behind them, but the XX racks were relentless, their ships now dead set on pursuit. Their swarming insectoid forms cut through the dark expanse of space, flashing with deadly intent. Lila Trent stood at the helm, the weight of command a constant pressure on her shoulders. The crew had fought hard, and Marcus had bought them some time, but the odds were still stacked against them. The Athena was battered, her hull scarred from the XX Rack's barrage, and the shields were down to a threadbare 12%. The ship had barely survived the last wave of attacks. "We're not going to outrun them," Lila said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. "Maybe not," Sarah Navarre replied from her station, her fingers flicking across the console. "But we can fight back. We got one more trick up our sleeve." Lila's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Sarah's lips curled into a tight smile, her usual calm demeanor making way for the steely resolve that had become her trademark. "I've been rerouting energy to the secondary weapon systems. They're not much, but if we time it right, we can hit them hard enough to cause a temporary disruption. They'll hesitate, just long enough for us to make our next move." Lila didn't hesitate. "Do it. Get ready to fire when I give the word." Meanwhile, deep inside the labyrinthine tunnels of the XX Rack's homeworld, Marcus Hayes was on the move again, weaving through the dense underbrush. His target was clear: disable the XX Rack's command center. The EMP blast he'd triggered earlier had caused chaos, but was only a temporary victory. Now, the XX Racks were scrambling to restore their power, but their command center remained intact, still functional, still a threat. The air was thick with tension as Marcus moved silently, using the chaos of the planet's environment to his advantage. The XX Racks were formidable in their territory, but their reliance on technology made them vulnerable to disruption. As he neared the entrance to the command center, he paused, crouching low behind a moss-covered rock. His sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, noting the heavy security presence. "All right," he muttered to himself. "Let's see how well they handle this." He pulled out a small device from his pack, a high-tech hacking tool. It was a crude, makeshift creation, but Marcus had learned long ago to make do with what he had. With a few quick commands, he hacked into the perimeter security system, causing the cameras to flicker and the guards to briefly lose their focus. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Slipping inside, he found the heart of the XX-RAX command center, a sprawling chamber filled with rows of control panels and screens. The walls buzzed with a hum of alien machinery, but Marcus was already moving to the central console. He didn't need to be a genius to know what to do next. Pulling out another EMP device, he placed it carefully on the console and triggered the countdown. The low beep of the device echoed in the room, a countdown to chaos. Marcus's voice was low, but his words carried the weight of defiance. Time to see if the XX-RAX are really the apex predators. Back aboard the Athena, the situation was growing dire. The XX-RAX fleet was closing in fast, and Lila knew they had only moments before their enemies were upon them. The small window of opportunity Sarah had created would not last long. If they didn't strike first, the XX-RAX would overwhelm them. "Now, Sarah," Lila called, her voice sharp. Sarah hit the button, and the Athena's remaining weapon systems flared to life. A pulse of bright, concentrated energy shot out toward the nearest XX-RAX ship. Striking it dead on, the ship jerked violently, its systems sparking and flickering. For a moment, it hung in space, a moment of hesitation. The other ships slowed, their coordination faltering. Lila didn't wait for the XX-RAX to regroup. "Jasper, can we make the jump to hyperspace?" Jasper was already working at a station, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought to keep the ship together. "I can try. It's going to be rough. The engines are still running on overdrive." Lila didn't care. "Try." With a roar, the Athena's engine surged again, pushing the ship forward at a speed that nearly sent the crew hurtling from their seats. The stars around them elongated into streaks of light as the ship shot toward the event horizon of hyperspace. The XX-RAX were closing in, but the crew had done their part. Now it was up to the ship and their final gamble. Marcus's heart pounded as he watched the timer on the EMP device tick down. The XX-RAX command center was in chaos, alarms blaring as the systems began to fail. He didn't have much time. He had to move, had to get back to the surface before they found him. The EMP device detonated with a low, muffled thud, sending a shock wave to the command center. The lights flickered, and the central systems powered down. Marcus didn't hesitate. He bolted for the exit, knowing the XX-RAX would be coming for him. But just as he reached the door, a low growl rumbled behind him. He turned, eyes widening. A XX-RAX warlord stood in the doorway, its massive insectoid frame filling the space. The creature was far more imposing than the others, its mandibles clicking in hunger as it stepped forward. Marcus's grin was reckless. Well, if it isn't the apex predator himself. He pulled out his blaster, taking aim at the warlord's chest. The XX-RAX's thick exoskeleton would make a clean shot nearly impossible, but Marcus had never been one to back down. With a wild burst of gunfire, he aimed for the creature's eyes, its vulnerable weak points. The warlord roared, staggering back as Marcus continued to fire, each shot forcing the creature further away. He knew he couldn't kill it with a few blasts, but he could buy himself enough time to escape. As the warlord howled in fury, Marcus made his move, darting for the exit. He had done his part. Now, he just had to get out alive. Back in space, the Athena shuddered as it entered hyperspace, the stars collapsing into streaks of light as the crew was thrust into the unknown. The XX-RAX fleet was left behind, but Lila knew the battle wasn't won yet. The Athena might have escaped for now, but the XX-RAX would not stop hunting them. They were no longer just invaders in enemy territory. They were prey, survivors, and their fight had only just begun. Lila turned to her crew, her face hardening with determination. "We survived their first wave, but the real fight begins now. They'll come after us, harder than ever, and we'll show them that humanity is more than just a species. They're about to learn why we're the apex predators of this universe." Her voice rang with a fierce promise, and as the Athena sailed deeper into the uncharted expanse of space, they knew one thing for certain. The universe had underestimated humanity, and that was their greatest mistake.